$1 billion business with a founder and 40,000 agents.
It's now a 10x, 100x improvement.
The agentic promise has become reality. The reality lies somewhere in between those two.
People can really over-romanticize being in the startup.
The reality is it's hard work. If you're younger, got nothing to lose, give it a crack.
I think that's a really exciting thing about AI.
It's high risk. Not everyone's up for that. It's a very exciting place to be part of that transformation. We built the product, we launched it.
Is there a next frontier of wonderful that's exciting for you personally? Dalibor, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time and for joining me today.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
Lovely. You're at a very exciting point in your life, I would say, after getting to know that you're also a Duntroon grad. Us former military officers seem to be, in the orbit of the tech world inevitably. But your journey really going from the early days into founder and now operator, and you've joined a very exciting Agentic AI startup, very new, as the GM for ANZ. So I'd love to hear all about your personal story, but of course, why you really chose to join Wonderful at this point in your life and perhaps this point in time as well. So really excited to draw all of that out today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with Wonderful. It's a wonderful name, and what Wonderful is it's an agentic agent, applied agent business. So we're in the world of solving the enterprise's most critical workflows from start to finish. We engage with the enterprise, we bring a platform, and we bring the deployment capabilities in terms of the best and brightest people to apply agents within the enterprise to solve their critical workflows. So that's fundamentally what the business does. We sit on top of the models, we're model agnostic, and it's all about how do we solve problems for the enterprise. I think the last few years, everyone has been talking, well, maybe not the last few years, but it's certainly the last 12 to 18 months, everyone's been talking about AI. I think in the last 6 months, the agent story has become so robust that you can't avoid it, and it's so critical in efficiency in the enterprise. And that's what we do. So in terms of the story, going from the green machine in the very early stages, and then into corporate consulting, and then building equities trading platforms, starting a business, selling a business. Happy to go through all that.
It's very instrumental and informative to what's brought you, to this point. So do appreciate that. I'd love to start though with the Wonderful angle. Yeah. I think AI transformation today in the market can be seen as maybe fraught with danger, could be seen as very transformative in itself. When we caught up recently, I loved the 7 habits of highly effective people. Let's start with the end in mind. And I think you were anchoring on what would it take to be a 2 to 3 person organization and be a few $1 billion, in revenue or valuation. And I think that's a really interesting, optimistic, philosophical framing to think about in the future looking and sort of working backwards from there. But what's the reality on the ground today from what you're seeing? Yeah,
it's a touch on that, right? You've got enterprises that are 50,000 people doing things the traditional way. You've got a really strong people management sort of structure and process, and you're trying to deliver work and outcomes to the end customer by delivering either products or services. And then you look at the future, which is this sort of nirvana state, which you hear on podcasts, but no one's done in reality yet, which is you can start a $1 billion business with a founder and 40,000 agents or whatever it is, and max out your tokens, and all of a sudden you've made a ton of money. So that's kind of the reality lies somewhere in between those two, and I think what we're seeing on the ground is pilots and co-pilots in the last, if I take back sort of 2 years, I'd say data foundation, and we know that AI is coming. How do we set the data fabric, the data mesh, the data foundations within the organization so that it can be consumed by agents later on? And then we saw a whole bunch of improvements in analytics. We saw a whole bunch of improvements around let's bolt on co-pilots and let's do a whole bunch of AI pilots. And that was probably all of last year. Companies opened up the tools and said, go forth and multiply, use whatever tools that you want. And then a lot of them quickly shut it down when they worked out all the security vulnerabilities and the access that had. And then I think what's happened in the last sort of 6 months is the agentic promise has become reality, where you can do, whether autonomous or human in the loop, you can do a lot more tasks in a highly sophisticated way that hasn't been available before. And that's where we are now, that the pilots are finished or some are still underway. The Australian market is highly concentrated, so you've got companies that have a lot of room to move in this space. It's highly concentrated. There's a bit of a buffer in terms of what they can absorb, and they need to do things right. So there's a focus on quality and security. So what they're focusing on now is not just what can the agents do, but what does it do to our security, compliance and governance and the guardrails. I think they've seen the promise, they buy into the promise, but now it's what is that harness and the wrapper that sits around the agents that actually makes it realistic to use.
Yeah,
that's the reality now.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to take a step back and just understand why you actually chose Wonderful. Yeah. Out of all of the AI solutions, Agentic applications today, what was it about Wonderful that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think, look, if I go back to my, the prior career, I think I always felt like I was out of place in the corporate sector. I think Duntrin was great. Like, people were operating a million miles an hour and sort of high agency, high confidence, and this view that in the army you just get told what to do. I found it a really free environment in terms of agency to do what your tasks, right? Freedom within boundaries. Here's the left and right of arc. Go forth and do what you need to do. So I found it a high agency environment. Corporate, I found probably less so, and I always felt out of place because I wanted to operate at a much faster pace. So I went through that and kind of worked out over an 8 to 10 year period that that's not right for me. And then started a business where you can have a lot more control, controlling the outcome. You can operate at the pace and urgency that you need to. Eventually sold that business and then found myself in the same environment where it's like, here is a sort of a company that is very large, and large companies have their benefits, but they also have their downside for individual agency. So I wanted to be very deliberate around the next opportunity, and I looked at it and said, well, what's going to be on a tear over the next 5 to 10 years? I think over the next 5 years, 10 years, cyber and AI were the only two things. They were the only things getting investment. I was looking at Y Combinator, what are the companies that are being invested in, and every cohort had whatever it was. It just put AI in front of it. But so that was I wanted to work. Signal. Yeah, I wanted to work with AI and specifically agents. And my background was enterprise, so it needed to be agents within the enterprise. And then the next thing was, I want to work on a platform that is incredibly modern and capable, and actually solves real world problems for the enterprise. So Wonderful had a massively invested platform. It is very modern, very capable. And then the third sort of piece was, I want to work with amazing people. I want this sort of startup energy, the hustle, the good vibe, things that you see when you go into an office. You can just feel it, right? Like, you can feel that energy. And Wonderful had all of those things. I looked at, when you look at the hyperscalers or others, they're just so big. Like, as a ex-founder, I just wouldn't be able to fit in that environment. I need to work in an environment where it's high agency, a lot of urgency, a lot of independence, and you can have impact on what you're doing. I think that's the critical part.
Yeah, I love it. And it feels like it translates into the culture and the DNA of the people that come into Wonderful. Talking about upholding the standard and maybe the way you hire as the leader here in ANZ.
Yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Definitely. The standard is very high. And that's because we need the best and brightest people to deliver on the promise. And that promise is, we come to you with an incredible AI agentic platform, and we come with a deployment team that actually understands, in some cases, your business better than you do, and understands the capability of what agents can do in your environment. So that's the best and brightest. So we're looking at engineers, we're looking at CTO, we're looking at people that go to market, but it's all about that intersection of, here is the latest and greatest tech, and here are problems that need to be refactored within the enterprise. So in terms of the standard, we do a large number of interviews, which I think is consistent with most companies now. It's a large number of interviews, but I think it ultimately comes down to what we're looking for is, based on our values, independence, urgency, agency and vibe. Like they're our core values, and I assess every candidate based on that. And you can tell very quickly, are they a YouTube recording or a playback on 1.5 or 0.5? It's like
nice,
that. Maybe that's a proxy for urgency.
2x.
Yeah, 2x. Are the candidates that you're interviewing, do they demonstrate that they're slightly risk tolerant or highly risk tolerant in terms of the positions that they've taken? If it's fully corporate, or if they've worked in organizations that are slow, they're not going to have that urgency. So I think founders work really well. I think the latest stats I saw that we've recruited like 70 founders within the business. So it's highly sort of founder dominated business. And I think that'll probably spawn the next set of companies once Wonderful reaches the lofty heights of where it needs to go. So that's the key thing, is high agency, good independence, and just really bright people.
Yeah, I love it. Lots of founder mode running around.
Founder mode, the beast mode.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about the new archetype of tech company, very much in the AI domain, as Wonderful is. And even you touched on it lightly there, Dalibor, in terms of the go-to-market team, the for deployed engineers, the CTO is the most technical person in the region. And what we notice around a lot of the AI companies today is they have almost the center of gravity within the country.
Yep.
Is that abnormal perhaps to what we've seen in the past? I believe there's a bit of a differentiation there, and it's probably also proved by a few really, really successful AI-driven companies. Very well known globally, Palantir being one, and just that model as it relates to an AI platform, horizontal vertical use cases, and the transformational impact it does have on the largest enterprises in the world. I think the outcome almost necessitates that model. What's your experience been like in the first few months in the role at Wonderful as to rolling that out?
Yeah, it's in two parts. I'll touch on the sort of the external and the operating part, and then I'll touch on the internal part. I think you're right. Palantir was super successful with that model, and everybody's copying it. If I take a step back and say, look, the last 10, 15 years were dominated with SaaS platforms that here's a data store for your enterprise data, here is a workflow layer with business logic, and here's a presentation layer. And we'll tweak the presentation a little bit, but you're pretty much getting whatever the SaaS platform offers. I mean, Salesforce was a little bit different, ServiceNow was a little bit different, but for most SaaS platforms, it's take it or leave it with minimal customization around the edge. So the center of gravity was held very close, to the headquarters of the business and where it was developed. And what you got at the edge was, well, here's here's some go-to-market, here's some customer success. Go-to-market is to sell your platform, and then the customer success is to prevent churn. That was the traditional model. And now the model is there's a lot more tailoring and engineering that's required at the edge. Palantir obviously dominated that. But when you start to apply AI, you need to engineer elements at the edge. You need to train the agents, you need to code up the agents, you need to code up the endpoints. So the level of skill and expertise required at the edge, and I'll say the edge, it's like within country, is pretty high. I think we're seeing a lot of rebranding of forward deployed engineers from the traditional solution architects, solution engineers. But unless your platform supports that, where you can actually code and configure and deliver the outcomes very close to the customer, you're going to be stuck in the same thing. So the wonderful model is deploy in region, build up the region as rapidly as possible. And we've built out 30 different regions or 30 markets in the last 6 months, and the model's working really well, where you work really close with the customer. You do the coding, bring the best and brightest, you sit with the customer. And I think the other piece is, rather than doing these really long proof of concepts or pilots, you can configure an agent to do what it needs to do in hours. Mm-hmm. So the speed of delivery, as well as the degree of customization that you have at the edge is amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely a different model, isn't it, from what was known 10 years ago. So, next frontier from technology. Switching tact a little bit just back into the enterprise lens, you're working really with ASX 200 companies, as I understand it, in Australia. What's the ideal sort of profile of company that might be ready to really adopt a solution like Wonderful? Is it typically, as you were describing before, they have this readiness now? they've moved past the piloting and the awareness stage, and they're really ready to maybe choose a use case or a workflow, or go into full partnership mode?
I think they're already in full partnership mode or ready to choose. I think the pilots were done, or evaluations and things like that were done largely last year.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's this slightly different acceleration, and some are far more advanced than others. But I think what they're looking for now is, how do I do it? How do I chalk up the efficiencies? And there's two things that are happening. One, boards are seeing US companies adjust their workforce based on, okay, we've got AI coming. What's the cost savings that you're chalking up? And everyone's doing AI. What are you doing? So there's definitely pressure from the top to do something. I think where we're seeing the most work is re-architecting the use cases for them. So in a typical organization, we target, like we said, the ASX 200. We work with large enterprises. We start with pick a use case and then work our way through to enhance that. Really strong on voice and customer experience. So we can implement voice agents and chat agents within the customer experience. So anytime a consumer interacts with an enterprise, we can do that really well. And then moving further into the organization, all the HR and people processes where there's a lot of interaction, again, voice and chat and back office use cases. And then as we move even deeper in, some of the core fundamental processes that drive the organization can be agentified. And that, what I say by agentified, it's bringing agents in an applied sense to solve problems.
Yeah, awesome. You gave me a couple of examples recently, Dalibor. Have you got a few of
them? So I think, if I look at the examples that we've done overseas, in other markets, flight changing is probably the number one airline use case from a customer experience perspective. Very, very painful at the moment. Painting the picture of what it looks like in a enhanced way. You've got voice agents that are low latency. You don't have to wait when you call someone. You can give it complex instructions. It can also change your hotel bookings and all your other bookings within the same transaction. And then it can, whether it's your insurance components that need to change. So that's kind of one example. The other one that we see on insurance is claims processing. Super painful to do. You damage your car or something, the number of touch points that you have, the long-running nature of the transaction, document validation, that can be streamlined. So there's hundreds of use cases that we've solved in a similar way, and it's all about rethinking of how you do this better. Not, here are my constraints, this is why it's been done this way. I'm unlocking new technology, how can it be done better?
Yeah, amazing. Is there an element of like first principles there? Just re-architecting and new ways of doing the thing?
Yeah, I think the way that we think about it as well is, why are you tied to a screen all the time in a form that's been prepared by someone, right? Like that whole interaction model, I think is fundamentally going to change, because you've got so many other ways of interacting. You can tailor the experience so much better. Even just looking at some of the things that you see in co-work right now in terms of the immediacy and the insights, the real-time nature of it. I think people are starting to see what other interaction models that they have with the enterprise based on what's coming from the consumer side, and it's going to fundamentally change the way that people interact.
Yeah, super interesting. It's almost like just the modes of human interaction, right, being replicated in the computer version.
Yeah.
It's just like its most rudimentary level. It's like we're just at that next advancement of technology, which is super interesting. Very cool. Back to the sort of profile of Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very early stage startup. It's
Yeah.
only 2 years.
About 2 years, 18 months.
18 months old, yeah.
Yeah, 18 months. First 12 months building out the platform and then proving it out in the most critical use cases.
Yeah.
And then the last 6 months has been hiring out basically a general manager for each region, and we've hired 30, I think it's like 30 at last count, it's probably more than that now, 30 regions that we've built out, and by the end of the year will be 1,000 people. So massively fast trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're personally in ANZ going from like 5 people to 15 in the next couple of months, right?
Yeah, so I was the first one in region, started towards the end of March, and building, hiring, interviewing a lot, It's like I enjoy interviewing because I get to sort of meet all different people. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, really good to see how different people have sort of structured their career.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just like a one silver bullet, is it? It's like, as you describe, risk on, risk off.
Yeah.
The personality type, potentially what they've done in their career. I'd love to know if you've, people in the market today that are considering joining like a hypergrowth or an early stage AI type company like a Wonderful. Do you think that there's like maybe pro tips you have in terms of considering a move into, if you've had a career in tech already or you're looking to get into the tech domain, what would you say about joining a company like Wonderful?
I think everybody thinks that it's like we're going to romanticize the startup world. The reality is it's hard work. It's high risk and it can be high reward. In an environment where cost of living is higher, it makes it harder for people to make that transition. So I'd say if you're younger and you've got nothing to lose, give it a crack. It's probably the first thing. And I think it's harder once as I've seen the profiles, once you have kids, it's a little bit harder because you're probably more comfortable and want more spare time. This is a business where it's all in. When I joined, that was one of the key deliberations was I can stay where I am. You can do your work in less time. It's a lot easier. There's a degree of comfort. And the choice I made was I dislike comfort. Well, I like comfort, but I like agency and being able to have an impact more. And that means hard work. So every day you're doing work that it's a lot of work, and startups are a lot of work. It's high risk. Not everyone's up for that. So I think it's good in the hiring process to work that out. And we've also had some that we've gotten through 6 or 7 interviews, and at the end they say, "I'm actually not up for the challenge. It's too hard work. I'm comfortable where I am. I'll come when it's a little bit later and a little bit easier." So it's a DNA. You either have it or you don't.
Yeah. So early in career or in the 20s, Twilight Zone, a little risk to take on, or you're a successful founder with an exit.
Yeah, I think it's also like being deliberate about what you want to do and what you want to achieve. And I've seen it before where people say, "I want to work in a startup," and they come and it's like, well, where's the processes? Where's this? Where's the assistants that do all these other things? You just don't have that. You've got to be willing to do that work on your own, and some people are and some people aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the DNA of the person that's very like entrepreneurial, because I feel like that high agency, and maybe it's a common ground we have coming from the military, where I agree, it's like you have an operating environment, but you've got the left and right of arc, and you can be autonomous in a sense. And I think that's carried through with my personal journey. I went into SAP in a commercial sales role. I was like, what have I done?
How did you go there?
Yeah, it was a bit of a culture shock for sure. It's just like, very big, large tier 1 tech company, ERP provider. I was selling HCM software into the mid-market in ANZ. And I was just like, well, this is just like, probably could have done a little bit more research, but high agency bias for action. I just jumped straight in the deep end and thankfully found my feet in cybersecurity. It's been amazing, and working in different profiles at companies. But I think there's a lot to be said with really understanding yourself first and foremost. And also like potentially it's a hand on hot stove thing. You've got to find the environment that really works for you. Yeah. But I do think that founder entrepreneurial archetype that's within people, when you recognize you have that, that's potentially like a very, very strong signal of like, okay, totally. An earlier stage company, a startup, test the waters a little bit with a higher risk, high reward sort of company is probably like a very good bet, but I appreciate it's also not for everyone. And it's not for everyone. I agree. Like people can really over romanticize like being in the startup, and it's just like, it's hard work.
It's a grind. I shared this before. When I had my other company, you do the morning shift, then you have dinner with the family, and then you do the afternoon, the night shift, and you're working. And post acquisition, I missed that. There were a couple of things that I missed. One was I don't know why I went into my office after dinner, because one, maybe the motivation wasn't there, but also there was no one else operating at that time as well. And then the other one was if I sent an email or a message or a Slack 6, 7, 8 at night, I would get a response pretty quickly, not the next day. So that was like, what? Like people aren't like on the clock all the time.
Yeah.
And some people are not up for that. The other thing about sort of the unexpected thing about Wonderful is because it's a business that's been built in the AI and agentic space, I think that the operating model and structure of how business is going to operate in that environment are going to be very, very flat. The information within Wonderful flows extremely fast. You've got everything interconnected, everyone can see everything, it's fully transparent. So a lot of this middle layer that's processing information flows between structures just doesn't exist. So the speed at which you can operate, the transparency, it's something that I just wasn't expecting. It's very beneficial, and I think layers. I think when you go back to either military or even prior to that with the Legionaries, it's like why are teams structured of this size? Why are there 7 layers of management or whatever it is the optimal number? And it's to enable those information flows going from top to bottom and across teams. We don't have that. It's very, very flat. And I think the mandate is that it's going to continue to be flat because all the information's always available. So either horizontally looking at cross teams or vertically in terms of top to bottom, information, everything's known to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a completely different paradigm.
Do you believe that's at the heart of it, like what the technological shift has been, even like looking way back? If it's like maybe scriptures in written form, the definition of information technology has been like, how does information flow? And I think that's just advancing so much now where we're truly becoming AI native. And Wonderful is probably a really good example of that. Young company, and it's like very flat, right? It's just instantaneous access to information.
Yeah.
I think that's a really exciting thing about AI, sort of moving away from maybe IT into
totally.
AI form.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of Google was first with sort of storage and content, and the hyperscalers came in on that, and I think now it's the whole intelligence piece becomes goes back to what are you studying at school when intelligence is now free, the constraints are different. Storage is kind of free. Now intelligence is going to be kind of free, but tokenized. But so it's a completely different model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure the way you've got the operating environment internal to Wonderful also portrays when you're working and partnering with customers, right? Because you're helping them ultimately become AI native. You're not looking for that incremental 10% improvement.
Yeah. Back
in the old day, maybe even if that was a few years ago, it's now like a 10x, 100x improvement in something. Yeah. Which is really, that's a proper like revolutionary or transformational impact that companies can now have with this sort of technology.
Yeah, and I think the exciting part is what do you do with all the unlocked capability that you get? Like new business models, new services that are going to be offered. There's, I think about it as, Qantas VIP line or something like that. You go, well, everybody's going to be able to have that level of service to a degree. Whether they open it up or not is another thing, but everyone's going to get this hyper personalized service from the organization, and you're also going to be able to unlock that to sort of markets that you previously couldn't economically target. So I think the business models will change. What gets offered to who gets changed. So it's a very exciting place to be part of that transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. Voice, like agentic, chat, is there like a next frontier of Wonderful that's exciting for you personally, Dalibor, to see it come to life as you build out the region?
The voice stuff is amazing. Yeah. Like being able to converse with someone and not be able to detect who it is. Like I put my wife's voice in it. So it's just like it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the complexity of problem solving and what it can execute on the back end. That's what makes it magical, because not only is it you're interacting with something that then gets handed off, you're interacting with something that's actually solving it across multiple core platforms. I think that part's really exciting. I think the people services are good, but I think the back office transformation where you can start to see massive transformation to optimize how things are done and then unlock new business models and value, I think that's the exciting part.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a certain value exchange or like a specific ROI you see that really works for these large enterprises when they're thinking about these type of capabilities?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it before, where previously you had like a 10% uplift in productivity or a 5%, and I know there's this sort of let's do 1% every day and you get to, that equates to a massive number. I think what happens here is that you're looking at the fully loaded people cost and then working backwards from that, and how that pie gets chopped up and who captures what, I think is different. But I think the productivity benefits are 10 or 100x, and we probably haven't even looked at the full extent of what the models can provide.
Yeah. What's your perspective on, there's a huge impact to the business and the entity, board of directors, the executives, new ways of doing business, capabilities being unlocked. What do you think from a human-centered perspective? What does it do to people's skill sets? Access to intelligence being a bit more omnipresent in the future?
I think it levels the playing field, and I think that if you're super smart right now, like me, I'm not saying I am, but I always thought my capability was around being able to look at a problem, decompose it, match out the patterns, and rebuild that into something that I can then communicate to someone else. That skill set that I have, totally useless, and invested a lot of money developing it. Some of it was maybe native, some of it was education. AI can do that 1,000 times better than I can. My skill set then changes to how do I switch that out to more people interaction. So I think what we're going to see is more people interaction with supplementary inputs. Like, I'm sure coming into this, you probably prompt, I'm meeting this person, give me the detail of what I need to, what's their background and what are the touch points. So I think the supplementary stuff that you get is going to make the human interaction more valuable. And I think people are going to change roles. I mean, I interview probably 50 people a week, and as I look at them, it's very easy to determine, are you processing information up and down the information hierarchy within the organization, or are you producing something? I think that to be more valuable, the human part of it is agentic AI and AI in general will unlock people so that they can focus more on production, or production or human interaction, and they'll be supplemented with the capabilities that are provided. Yeah,
absolutely. From a hyper competitive perspective, it's you're very much at the tip of the spear in terms of capability and technology. How do you actually distinguish between fact and fiction in a sense? There's a lot of hyperbole or marketing gloss around agentic capabilities today.
Yeah.
How do you truly, as a business leader, really distinguish the true capabilities of a new innovation or platform when there is a lot out there?
Yeah, so I'd say everything on LinkedIn is probably auto-generated. I think every technology leader's probably rebranded themselves, or at least inserted some AI-based AI content in their profile. I think what's real is the interaction with the customer. Like I listen to a couple of things, but most of the time it's interaction with customers, working with the enterprise. What are they working on? What's valuable? Where are they seeing pain? How can we help unlock that? That's the true test. I think everyone's an expert with everything, and we see that through things that are published on LinkedIn. Like, everyone's an expert, everyone's publishing around AI. The reality is there's probably, if I look at it, 200 companies in Australia in terms of the sort of the leading companies. It's what they're doing day to day to solve their customer problems through AI. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. That element of customization you spoke about, Dalibor, at the edge for organizations. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? How does that come to life?
Yeah.
Why is that different, perhaps?
Yeah, so I think we do it in two ways. One, when we deploy agents, those agents are highly configurable so that you can have a conversation, you can load in a lot of information, the context can be shared or localized. So I think in terms of the work that the agent does, there's tailoring around that. I think the other part is then when you look at an agent, it doesn't work in isolation. You need the guardrails, you need the harness, you need the memory and the context, you need the security and compliance, you need the governance, you need someone monitoring the agents, and then you also need endpoint access in terms of security. So there's a lot of work to do to actually bring it to life, and it's not simple. So having the forward deployed engineers on site with the customer. So the way that we go to market is that we identify some use cases. CTO, forward deployed engineer, deployment strategist go on site with the customer and configure the use case in real time. So by the end of a day or two, you can actually see that agent working, and you can compare it to the standard way that people complete that use case.
Evaluations, measurement, does that Does it typically come to life differently for organizations, or is there some common structures?
Yeah, I think it depends on the use case itself. Like if it's voice, it's normally containment rate. How do you solve it? How many are non-compliant with the monitoring of the agent? As you get to sort of the people-based services, it's probably like number and resolution times. And I think what you find is that the resolution time goes down, and the case containment goes down as well. So the case containment is more robust.
And then personas within the organisation. Are you typically interfacing with more technical stakeholders, executives? Is it maybe a big shift that you're seeing just with AI and the agentic capabilities it brings, maybe touching multiple stakeholders? What does that typically look like in terms of engagement model?
I think the Australian market's a little bit different in that there's typically a coalition of the willing that needs to be found at the executive level to get it in. I think every CEO has some level of we must do AI and we must transform. What I've seen, I look back the last 5 years, there was always a digital transformation or a transformation lead. Now we're seeing AI transformation lead. I think they're the change agents within the enterprise that are changing. But then you've still got the technology teams, CTO, CIO that need to actually execute a lot of the time. And then you've got the business side. So a typical engagement, there'd be a transformation person, chief transformation or chief digital and AI officer or something like that. There'd be, for example, the exec that's responsible for customer experience. Maybe that's on the retail or the business side. And then you'd have the CTO or the person below that looking at it. And that's kind of the coalition of the willing. And then it depends on the use case. So if you're re-architecting a claims process, maybe it's the person who's sort of functionally and business responsible for claims management, owns the call center, owns the team, owns all the processing part. But the chief digital and AI officer or equivalent, we're definitely seeing that in most enterprises now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very common title, isn't it? How about from a, we were sort of joking earlier about the frameworks and the OODA loop from the military. You're describing coalition of the willing, just maybe from the school of sort of enterprise sales. We very much sort of grow up on the MEDPIC sales methodology and framework, and even, Army having the best leadership training and institution in the world. I feel like in the AI era, there's almost like an element of, there's not just like a playbook to roll out. It's like you have to be a little bit more judged and a bit more intelligent around the way you solve the problem, just because of the flat structure and the AI native and the distillation of information is all accessible today. Would you say that's the case from your experience? It's not necessarily rolling MEDPIC over the stakeholders and stuff. It's more like that true partnership. There's a newer way to do things.
Yeah, I think there's a newer way to do things, and you need to be the human in the loop doing it. Because what you could do, and it's the same with candidates, right? If you take the candidate model where, well, I'll have a candidate, I'll have AI generate my resume, and then on the other end, I'll have the institution analyze the resume and then make a decision with AI. And so it's like there's no human in the loop there. Yeah. It's the same thing with RFPs, right? Like you'll say, well, I'm looking at this particular technology. ChatGPT, write me the RFP document, and then you send it to a vendor, and the vendor will say, well, evaluate all my content against these RFP things, and it's like, what's the point? Without the human in the loop, there's no nuanced answer in terms of how it should look. So I think it's the personal connection now that's way more valuable than just here's a checkbox, here are particular vendors, and that's why we pitch ourselves as a partner rather than a vendor. I think if you're going down the vendor path, it's just going to be check boxes in a particular category, and it's very, very difficult.
And I think that deployment model supports that too, right?
Yeah.
Like you're literally on site, you're truly partnering with the customer. At the end of the day, when you're realizing a new opportunity or a new way of doing things, it's just like that, not so much helping or solving a problem, it's just like the whole model changes.
Absolutely.
It flips it on its head. Yeah. What are you most excited about with the wonderful opportunity, Dalibor? You're 3 months in at this point.
Yeah, 3 months in. I'm excited every day to work with the people that I work with. That's number one. And then the second one is I'm excited to I think at heart I'm a sort of an optimist around optimizing things. I really look forward to bringing the technology to the enterprises in Australia. The transformation that we can bring, the benefits that accrue to the organisation and the benefits that accrue to the end customer. I think that's the really exciting part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a really exciting place to be right now in terms of Agentic. It's early, but the benefits are there for sure.
Are you doing still an element of like awareness and education in terms of like the future-looking capabilities? Because I know that there's like a maturity cycle. One of my favourite quotes is "the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed." I'm sure you're always navigating that, right? With one foot in each camp.
Yeah. Look, I think no one knows what the future holds, right? Like that's the hardest part is with this things I think arguably always take longer than expected. I'm optimistic that the technology that we're bringing is delivering immense value to the enterprise, and that's what we're focused on, just delivering that value.
Yep, absolutely. What about your leadership experience, and maybe what out of the your founding journey, you thought something maybe 3 or 4 years, it turned into a 12-year journey of Katora. You're very much working in the DevOps space. It does feel a bit tangential in this sort of newer area too.
Look, I think. So I started a business. So I started off building equities trading platforms, then built internet banking platform, then became CIO within an investment bank, and then moved to do a startup. We kind of at the time thought this will be pretty quick. I think the startup space in Sydney was like booming at the time. Everyone was thinking about doing a startup. We put a date in the calendar and said, this is the date we're going to quit our jobs and we're going to start this business. So very exciting times. We thought, look, this will be 4 years. I think the 4 years meant 4 years of not getting paid in the early stage, and then ended up building it. We built the product, we launched it. We had a customer in the UK, a customer in Brussels, customer in the US, and customer in Melbourne. It was like the first 3 customers. So instantly, we were spread globally. The product was in the DevOps space. It was around optimizing how enterprises release software, how they manage their underlying test environments, and then ultimately how they manage value streams. So it was an optimization technology. 4 years turned into 12 with COVID, and then sold it into a private equity-backed US company. Another great company, great CEO there. I think that journey was around, one, again, it was enterprise customers. We were helping customers, how do you optimize a particular work stream within the organization? I'd say Wonderful is a much broader and ambitious approach where it's like, we can help you optimize any process. For that, it was just software delivery. That was the constraint at the time. I think that, on reflection, one of the things that when I looked at optimization back then, it was why are you optimizing? You're optimizing because you've got all these constraints. You've got valuable resources, so you need to put in checks and balances along the way. When the constraint shifts and the cost of agents are introduced and you've got that arbitrage between people and agents, the constraints are not there. You're producing so much more in every dimension. It's like you're working what do I take and what do I throw out? Like right now, it's like I need a PowerPoint slide. Can you produce 5 different variants and I'll pick one? Like I think the same thing's going to happen within the enterprise to some degree, provided the token cost remains the same. The constraint shifts, and I think as you move into optimization, it's about optimizing the end experience for the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you typically seeing like multiple agents working together to get the outcome?
Yeah, totally. I think that's the other thing, that the agent-to-agent protocol is absolutely critical. The harness, the governance, and I think that's where customers always have the choice. Do I go with a hyperscaler? Do I go with a toolkit from one of the other vendors? We provide an end-to-end platform. It's the harness, it's the agent, it's the governance, it's the metrics, it's the outcome, it's the policy that is enforcing the behavior of the agents. I kind of think about it as sort of ideologically as if I was building a HR platform for agents with, I've got an onboarding, I've got performance management, I've got behavior management, I've got sort of, what's the PIP thing, what's that, performance improvement plan or something like that. All of those capabilities you have to do for agents. Like I've got to, and for an employee, I need an access card. For this particular agent, I need access to particular systems. So having that all encapsulated within one platform means that you can deploy that a whole lot faster than trying to do it piecemeal by just saying, look, I've got an agent, now I've got to pick up context from somewhere else, now I've got a security provider somewhere else. It's just a whole lot faster and easier for the customer.
Oh, the end-to-end comprehensiveness of having that all in one must be just like very refreshing as well for the enterprise.
Yeah, and with the people as well, right? Like that's the other part, is that someone's sitting with you to deploy it with you every day.
Yeah, absolutely. The expert on that platform, deployment, like helping to actually transform. So it's very, very cool. Yeah. Is there an immediacy to what's next for Wonderful in terms of use case or application? I know it's early days, it's probably one of the earliest days.
Yeah, I think if you look at Australia, it's quite a concentrated market. I think like the first 30 customers, it's like financial institutions, telcos, insurance company, then airlines. So you look at that, there's probably like 40 customers within that, and they're all engaged, and we're working with them to deploy on that. So the immediacy is reference use cases in country. Like that's the number one.
Yep, absolutely, and you can absolutely grow from there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very, very cool. If anyone in the enterprise ASX 200 companies wanted to find you, Dalibor, what's the best way to reach you and the team?
Yeah, website, but also dalibors@wonderful.ai.
Yeah, love it. Very, very cool. And I'm sure you're growing the team quite exponentially. Lots of reference use cases to come, and very much look forward to seeing what's going to happen within the Australian landscape as it applies to agentic capability. I feel like the Australian market is also very forward-leaning too, like happy to take on risk, perhaps. Yep. Very much leaning in terms of culture of innovation. I don't know if that's been your experience too.
Yeah, I think it goes to the concentration of the industries in Australia. It gives them a lot more capital to deploy on doing things right and doing it really well and innovating. I mean, the CBA just had its AI summit last week. Sam Altman and Matt Common. It's like that's as forward-leaning as it gets, right? Yeah. I think when you're dealing with financial institutions other than the large ones, like we've got to remember that the US has a lot of regional banks, so trying to get projects and payments and other systems over the line is quite challenging. Due to the concentrated nature, forward-leaning, a lot of innovation, I think people sometimes forget like just payments and banking and like we're lucky here. The industries and the companies that we work with are world-class.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very forward-leaning, I would say, for sure. Yeah, very cool. To wrap up, Dalibor, what would you say is if someone's considering AI transformation and is sort of looking to really deploy and get these capabilities like rolled out in the enterprise, what from your experience, what sort of parting words of wisdom would you have for that decision-making process?
I think at a macro level, you're either disrupting or you're being disrupted. Like that's been said many times before. I think the other part is speed of execution is absolutely critical at the moment. And working with a partner that can actually bring the platform and the people all in one, I think that's a no-brainer. Yeah, absolutely unmatched in my opinion. Awesome, Dalibor. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Really excited to follow the Wonderful journey very, very closely. And I'm sure it'll be a superstar A-grade team in no time. And it's very exciting to see where this transformational effect can have an impact on the Australian organisations and wider society too. So look forward to supporting the journey. Thank you, Gabe. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Dalibor. Thank you.